It's another week. We are here. Can you imagine? I don't know. It's been great. Hey, I got a question for you. I don't mean to jump into it, guys. Do you listen to this as soon as it downloads automatically, assuming you're subscribed? Are you like, oh my gosh, it's in. Listen to Daryl. Because by the way, nobody does that. Nobody says, let's listen to Daryl. Or is there a certain time of the day or week that you like to listen to the Inside Sales Show? I'd be kind of curious. Drop me a line on that, because I'm trying to compare my listening habits to others. I want to see if there's any kind of commonality. Talk to your colleagues on the sales floor, the virtual sales floor these days, right? And see what they have to say. We can compare notes. I don't know why I want to know that. I'm thinking maybe I'll do some promotion. Who knows? Imagine me going on LinkedIn saying, okay, it's that time when all of a sudden you're all listening to your podcast. Did you know you can have all these cool features in your app player? You can increase the speed, get rid of the silences, all that great stuff. And by the way, if you don't know that, you should do that because there's some really cool features there. With that all said, I want to share a story this week that I'm sure many of you can relate to. This is an observation, and some of you aren't here in your life journey yet, but I am. And I am at a point, as I tell everybody, I don't have a problem telling you my age. I'm 53. And I'm at that point now where the kids are out of the house. They're both on their own, gainfully employed, doing quite well. And it's just the bride and I at home these days. Just the bride and I. And the thing about the bride and I is that, we've been married well over 30 years. I know we got married young. And you get into a rhythm. And so when the rhythm gets disrupted, you notice. All right. So that's that. And everybody who's married right now for an extended period of time is nodding their heads. And in my case, what I've noticed in the last year or two or three, I don't get it. It's just because maybe there's no kids anymore. Is that my wife will be doing something? Maybe I am, when my day is done, I have long days. So, I sit down in front of the TV maybe at 8:30, 9 o'clock at night. Finally, I'm like dead. I'm like zoned out, mentally exhausted. I talk nonstop. There's conflict. There's struggles. There's all the usual sales challenges that you all know. And I just want to, not people. I want to not people. And so she'll not people with me. We'll watch TV. And then she'll be flipping the phone, looking at her Facebook or talking to her friends or reading something. And then she'll turn to me and say, hey, you know what I learned today? Or, hey, I meant to tell you about this. Or, hey, you get the idea, which is what every couple wants. You want to have that lovely chance to catch up on your day and all this stuff that was notable. Except she always does it at just that moment in a show when, the main character is going to turn out to be a bad guy or going to wrap things up. Or if you're a Home and Garden TV fan, she does it just as they're doing the big reveal. You've got a half an hour or an hour into this show almost, and they're finally showing you the end result, and she wants to talk. Kills me. Reminds me of my kids when they were young. My youngest had the hardest time reading the room. And they would just blurt out their story in the middle of somebody else's conversation because it was firing on their mind right now. And, that's cute when they're a kid. Honey, you got to read the room. You got to interrupt. You got to use your manners. You can't just project. When you do that, you're sending the messages that you're not even listening to what they're saying. You just want to be heard. It's all about you. Then the person gets put off and you don't want to lose friends, right, honey? So my wife is kind of going back in time to where my kids were. So as you start, it seems you have this problem when you're young and you have this problem when you're old. So my question is, how come so many of you have this problem when you're not young and you're not old? You have this problem right now. You just want to talk. You know what you're not doing? Well, let me tell you what you're trying to do. You're trying to do some storytelling. And I'm a big proponent of storytelling. But you need to maybe exercise a little bit of control and practice some active story listening. You know what I'm saying? You see what I did there? So I thought, who's the right person to talk about the power of story listening? Now, this is not a term I coined. I would just say listening. But I like the premise of story listening because it truly is, the opposite of storytelling. And it really brings it to the next level. And that's where I got my good friend, Bruce Kirk. You guys know Bruce? He is
Hello,
with
everyone.
Slight Edge Selling. He's here. Bruce, how you doing, my friend?
Doing fantastic. Fantastic Friday.
Fantastic Friday.
Yep.
If you can't tell, we're recording this on a Friday. Going to wrap our week up, hopefully, and then my wife will probably interrupt halfway through. God bless her. And so Bruce is all about equipping business owners and sales teams. He helps them conquer all their greatest challenges in prospecting sales and sales recruiting, and really teaches you how to go from good to great. And one of the skills that Bruce is a huge advocate of, if you follow him on LinkedIn, and you should, by the way, go follow him on LinkedIn. It's literally Bruce Kirk. All right. You know, the classic linkedin.com/in/Bruce Kirk. All right. BRUCEKIRK.
Yes.
And he's talking about this a lot. And I'm like, I got to get this cat on the show. So Bruce, I set the stage. Welcome to the show. How did I do in my definition? In fact, let's just assume I sucked at what I was trying to say. And when you say story listening for the audience, what is it that you mean?
Yeah, so it's listening to, it's an advanced form of listening is what I call it, but it's listening to the prospect, to the client, or whomever you're interacting with to understand their context, what the circumstances are that they're facing, challenges they're facing, just how their day was, you know, in terms of your wife, relating it back to your wife, you know, she wants to tell you what her day was all about. And so it's, you know, listening to that story. And it takes concentration, right? And it takes focus. And but in that concentration, in that focus, you're validating your wife, you're validating your prospect, you're affirming them. They recognize that you're focused on wanting to understand them, and that is so powerful. And it's you know, just it's in any relationship, but it's immensely powerful in the prospecting and sales arena. So,
you know, I want to jump on that for a second. It's funny. You said some things that twigged me. One of them being she wants to share, right? That's what she wants to share. And now her timing sucks. But in my mind, I just, you know, what I want to do is go, like, why are you doing this now? Right. But I know if I do that, she'll deflate and then she'll stop sharing with me. And I don't want her to stop sharing with me. I like what she shares with me.
Yeah.
And I don't want to make her, I don't want to hurt her feelings. I don't feel bad. She's got to work on her timing. But the reality is I do want to hear what she has to say. And for me, it's the body language. And now in this scenario, basically for the audience, you're listening to me, in that scenario, I'm your prospect. And for the audience, you're my wife. The biggest thing I find is I hate when I'm the buyer, because you know, that's part of my job is I buy, and I'm talking to a prospect. I hate when they just go off on a tangent because their neurons are firing because all of a sudden they realize something else they want to say, especially, or when they cut me off or they interrupt me to say something because it just screams at me, you're not listening to me. You just want to sell me something. Is that normal?
absolutely. I mean, it's the more seasoned salesperson, the more sales professional will recognize that the needs and the wants of the prospect have to come first. And you know, when we're telling, and this is part of the point that I'm making, is that when we're storytelling, we're putting our needs ahead of the time. You know, and again, it begs another point, Daryl, that the timing of telling our story is key. So if we tell our story at the wrong time, it loses all its power. So we want to, and it's, you know, I'm a big proponent that we want to first become great story listeners, and then we'll know how to become great storytellers. So that's what I have to say on that.
Yes, you see what I was doing there? I was actively listening. But actually, I love what you just said, because it's true. You know, I have talked at length, and Bruce, you've even shared with me that you picked up on my advocacy for the power of storytelling. Right. I am a big believer in storytelling will win you deals because it helps establish rapport and makes what you're offering relatable. Mm-hmm. It allows you to connect your prospect with what you provide.
Absolutely.
Through personal anecdotes. But the challenge with storytelling is that I can be so busy telling my story or wanting to tell my story that I'm actually not paying attention to the signals that the prospect is giving me, which is maybe my story is shutting down them. They don't, they want to talk, and I need to stop talking so I can listen to them.
Absolutely. I mean, that just reminded me of the show up and throw up concept. But listening and pausing and taking the time and actually being curious and want to understand slows us down so that we can listen. But you brought up a good point that we need to have really acute situational awareness. So like, yeah, you want it in your example with your wife. Yeah, you've had a really, really challenging day. You want to sit down. You just want to unwind in front of the TV. And yet she starts talking to you. Well, that your antennas are up and they're buzzing and they're saying, well, wait a minute. She needs me to listen to her right now. She needs to be heard and she wants to be heard. So that by you putting her needs first and her wants and her desires, then you become a good listener and a good partner too.
And that everything you just described works, and we're talking obviously about a marriage, but it works the exact same way in a buying cycle, that you are partners in a dance, right? Your prospect has pains. And if you've done your job right through discovery and qualification, is you've poked and prodded and provoked them to start sharing about their pains. And all of a sudden this may turn into a venting session, a bitching session, oh my gosh, you happen to be the guy that came along and asked the right question, and blah, I'm just telling you everything going on, which of course for a salesperson is dynamite. That's what you want. That's how you get all the information to know how to better, position your offering. But I find too many reps are thinking about the next thing they want to say and they're not listening. And most prospects pick up on that.
Exactly. I mean, I assimilate storytelling to an advanced form of presentation. Advanced form of telling. So story listening is an advanced form of fact finding. I mean, it's advanced form of discovery. I mean, you want, if somebody's starting to vent with you and starting to share what their situation is, I mean, they're going to tell you just gold. They're going to give you gold in terms of what's going on. And they're going to, I found it many times, they're going to tell you how to sell them. And tell you what's going to make all the difference for them in terms of them becoming a buyer. And that's why it's another reason it's so vital to just pause back and let it rip and listen to understand. I mean, listening to understand is a big part of story listening, clarifying, well, did you mean that this, so that you clearly understanding, and that's part of the affirmation, the validation process, is communicating to the prospect that you want to understand and you want to get clarification so that you're aligned with what they're facing and what they're telling you.
You've reminded me, I think I've shared this before on the show. If I have, guys and gals, I apologize for repeating myself. My wife and I went to a marriage course several years ago, and the only thing that's memorable to this course about me, how bad is that? The only thing that's memorable in this course was the one line about communication, and the one line was listening, and it was to play back to your spouse because they want to feel heard and understood, especially if you have a disagreement or you're not aligned, shall we say. Mm-hmm. And what I'm supposed to do as the person who's actively listening is first you listen to them and then you play it back along the lines of, so what I'm hearing you say is, if I were to stop leaving the toilet seat up so you don't fall in the middle of the night, that would make you happy, right? So
and then actually do it. Yes.
Yeah, and then actually following through on it. But in sales, I'd be saying, so what I'm hearing you say is, if you could eliminate this block that's stopping you from all this process improvement, that it will increase your output and you will be a happy camper. Is that what I'm hearing you say? And they will correct you if you got it wrong. That's the beauty of that playback technique. They're saying, well, no, close, but what I really said was this. Oh, okay. Now we're aligned. Now that nuance was important.
And if you would ask an additional question, well, how would it improve your? I mean, what difference would it make in your process improvement?
Right.
So you're digging
Now
further.
you're getting them to quantify it.
Yeah. So you're getting
Yes.
if you think about story listening as an advanced form of fact finding, advanced form of inquiry, advanced form of discovery, that has helped me and just advance my ability to do this, because I want to be heard too. I mean, I'm a human being, but I want, selling is all about going to the bank. And so I want my prospect to be heard. I want them to be validated. But I want to do that sincerely and authentically too. But
So there you go, folks. One of the tips, if you want to be a better listener, confirm and clarify. It's also to your A, they'll feel heard. B, you'll have ensured that you got it right. And C, if you got it wrong, they're going to correct you. Right. So you can better position your solution. But you also touched on another thing beyond the confirm and clarify approach. You talked about discovery. And what people may not understand is when you say something like, okay, so we start off with confirm and clarify. So I heard you say, so if I got rid of this obstacle, you could get rid of this, you could produce more output. Is that correct? Yes. Now you said discovery. Why is that? Why will that, by getting rid of that, why does that increase your output? Help me understand that. I just don't understand it. And then shut up again. So it's the classic discovery. Bruce, you talked about being curious, but the reason we want to be curious, the reason we want to do discovery, so we can understand all the symptoms and grow the size and scope of the deal and better tailor our proposal to fit their exact needs so they'll be happy and they'll become a customer and they'll be sticky. They'll stay with us for a long time. But that act of doing that discovery, help me understand why. Tell me about that. Explain that to me. Describe how that would affect you. TED, TED. And then shutting up, TED. That was the fourth part, which was shutting up, is all about story listening. Wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely, man. As I was, prepping for our talk today, go back. You had a post that I had originally commented on. That's how you and I met. Was the difference between marketing and selling. And one of the key points you put on there is marketing is one to many, and selling is one to one. And there's nuances there, but in general. And you mentioned the TED Talks, and they tell a lot of stories in the TED Talks, and that's one to many. So storytelling is I think more applicable to one to many, but it's applicable to the presentation phase. But if you're in the discovery, in the inquiry, in the fact finding, if you're able to listen, then you're able to save time and money, because when you get to your presentation phase, you know exactly what story to tell. You can tie what you heard in the story listening phase and tailor your story to exactly what the most frustrating part of their job is, that your product or your service can fix. So it's actually, just in general, I'm not I think it's genius. Story listening is the magic of storytelling. How do you like that
one? Wow. No, I mean, now, if you're watching this video as opposed to listening on the audio only version, you would have seen this like huge grin come across my face. And it wasn't a very smug, satisfied, like the cat just ate the bird grin. It was a epiphany grin, because you're right. Because I'm a huge believer and advocate and evangelist around storytelling. Kids, I open every single podcast episode telling a story, literally. Right. All right. And yet
that's one to many, Daryl. That's one to many.
That's I know, but that's where you rock my world. You just told me, because I have a whole bunch of stories. Right? And you're right, it's one to many, because I'm talking to the whole audience. But if I was talking to you, Bruce, the story would be very different. And because it's one to one. But what you rocked my world on was you just said, Daryl, it's in your own freaking best interest to do that listening, that story listening, because they're going to give you all these signals.
Yeah.
And then you can go in your bag of many, many stories and say, this is the story. I haven't told this story in a while. It's not my favorite story. It's not my go-to story. But because of all the stuff I just listened and heard, this is the story. It's going to get me this big ass deal.
You're learning it, man. You're learning it.
Dude, you're a good teacher.
Yeah, so. But again, so listening, I just want to drive that home. So listening is the magic of telling, but taking that first, story listening is the magic of storytelling. So I'm tying that back to, all the rage of storytelling and tying it into, we have 2 ears, 1 mouth. So we want to be listening, obviously, more than we're telling, but we want to be story listening more than we're storytelling. And frankly, we're going to be able to tell much better stories in the eyes and in the ears of the prospect and client when we first story listen. So my big stick for salespeople, sales professionals is that you need to first become a great story listener before you become a great storyteller. And in fact, if you actually become a great story listener, becoming a great storyteller will be easy because it'll just flow, because you'll know what to talk about in the ears of the client.
So kids, what's the flow? Just so you know, if you do discovery properly, they're going to tell you a story. This discovery, you're asking the questions. They're going to tell you a story. Then you do the clarification. Mm-hmm. So what I heard you say is this, and they're going to say yes. But when they told you the story, right, you were actively listening. Mm-hmm. You were story listening. Yep. And then the clarification just confirms what you thought you heard. Now you have what you heard clarified and confirmed. And now you go in your bag of tricks. And now you do this is the 1-2 punch. You started off with the discovery. Boom, you come back with the storytelling. Story listening drove storytelling.
Absolutely.
This has rocked my world.
Yeah.
This has rocked my world. I'm really excited about this. Okay. I got to ask a stupid question. How do I know if I'm crappy story listening?
Right. So I'm going to rephrase that. How does your audience tell? How can we tell that you suck at story listening? No.
There we go. What Hugh said.
So if you have these symptoms, it's a pretty good indicator that you're going to be a turnoff to your prospect. So number one, you're hungry for approval. You want to be validated yourself. And that's, that goes into the role of the sales leader, the sales manager, that they need to be validating their salespeople so that when they go out into the field and talking to the prospect, they're not seeking validation from their prospect, because the prospect wants validation themselves. So if the salesperson and the prospect both want validation, then there's going to be a war going on there. So you always want to defer your hunger for approval to the prospect. Another indication that you suck at story listening is that you think you're the smartest person in the room. Even if you are, you can't. You have to act like you're, take interest, genuine interest, curiosity in the other people that you have, so that they can, because you can always learn something from someone else. So even if you're the smartest dude, Daryl, please learn from other people, which I know you do. Another reason, so if you are doing most of the talking and your prospect's doing most of the listening, you suck at story listening. If you're in a hurry during the meeting, you're going to just default to be a bad story listener, because story listening takes time, but it's an investment because it'll shorten the sales cycle. So if you're in a hurry, you're going to suck at it. So if you're distracted, put your cell phone away, don't text during, when someone's sharing something with you, be focused, be attentive. So if you're distracted, then, what it's like when you're giving a presentation or you're telling a story and somebody's answering a text, or they're answering the telephone, or they're not listening to you. It's annoying. Well, the same thing with the prospect. If you're distracted, you're not listening, then that's annoying to them. Another And a real key aspect to know that you suck at story listening is that you have a personal agenda going into the meeting, other than wanting to clearly understand the parameters and the circumstances and the frustrations and the struggles that the prospect is experiencing, and typically related around the general product and service and category that you're selling. But if you have commission breath going into a meeting, you're not going to be a very good story listener. Because as you pointed out, you're going to be thinking, well, what's next? How can I lead this person? How can I, what am I going to tell? No, you listen first. You'll validate, you'll affirm, and you'll get all the clues that you need on how how this person wants to buy. So,
all right. There's more. Bruce is an expert at this, as you can tell. The best thing to do is connect with him on LinkedIn,
please.
And continue some storytelling, some story listening, and then maybe he can help you out and hit your goals. Because he's already said to you, if you do this, man, you're going to build better relationships. You're going to build better trust. You're going to have shorter sales cycles. You're going to have more profitable sales cycles. You're going to save time. You're going to save money. And he's already told you all the symptoms that if any of those resonated with you, well, then you're a good person to consider story listening.
Yes. So when you reach out to me, if I could ask, when you're reaching out to me on LinkedIn, if you want to connect or follow, it's just a simple click of the button. But if you want to connect, put a personal note in there, tell that you were on this podcast or heard the podcast, and that'll help tie me in. Because I don't accept many that blind invites. Because I want to, again, it's all related to, I want to understand the context of why. And that brings back to story listening. You want to understand the context of what your prospect is experiencing so you can tell a better story and a more relatable story from the prospect's perspective.
Perfect. All right, guys, that's it. You need to do a couple things. Share this episode with your colleagues. I guarantee you there's somebody out there on your team who could be, shall we say, better at story listening. My name is Daryl Prale. That, my friends, was Bruce Kirk, and we're out of here. This is another episode in the books of the Inside Sales Show. Take care.